introduction to Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, who reportedly composed his novel while at a library. The story goes he wanted to escape the two kids in his house, and he took a bag of dimes and he rented a typewriter that cost a dime an hour. And for the next 9 days, he wrote Fahrenheit 451, which may account for the length of the novel, but definitely not the themes in the novel, because there are very big ideas in Fahrenheit 451, even if the novel is a small one. Now, its primary purpose, I think, is to criticize society in some way, the society in his time, and the society that is to follow. So, the book warns against the dangers of suppressing thoughts and ideas through censorship. I think primarily here, though, is um, thoughts and ideas, or rather, suppressing that is self-imposed, right? Because the story Fahrenheit 451 admits that it's the people of that society who decided we don't want to think anymore, or rather, these books are too difficult, right? The concepts that these books are dealing with, and the books that they banned and they burned, are too much to handle. So they decided to censor those ideas, right? If you're thinking, we're trying to think about the impact of Fahrenheit 451, not only in its time period, but also its connection to the modern world, then we have to consider the way in which we also censor um, ideas or censor things that are too uncomfortable for us to hear. Think of it almost as what is it, PC, right? Political correctness. And in so many ways, we censor ourselves or censor each other in, in the name of something good, in the name of being respectful to other people. And yet we don't truly engage in ideas as often as we used to, right? Because we think that these ideas are dangerous, right? Like, don't talk about politics at the dinner table, don't talk about religion at the dinner table. Not necessarily that you have to, but the very fact that we are censoring the things that we can talk about is an expression through time of Fahrenheit 451. Now, the book also conveys a message where a government, if not checked, can do irreparable damage to a society by limiting the creativity and the freedom of its people. That is, we have to, or at least this is what the book is suggesting, we have to be aware of the government and ensure that they serve us, not that they control us. As always, propaganda is very prevalent in these books, primarily science fiction, and also books that are dystopian or present a dystopian future. Propaganda is used here in this society to control citizens. And if you're wondering which society do I mean, Fahrenheit 451 or our own, I probably mean both, because that's the case. Now, the natural world being banished or distrusted, that one's interesting because this one is also very prevalent in our world. They say that the last migration of man is out of the woods and into the apartment houses. They say that we are leaving nature once and for all. And which is not to say that we don't see nature. You go outside right now, you'll see a tree, sure. But we don't live in nature. We live around nature. Nature is always on the outskirts, always limited to the in between the roads, right? Nature is never something we fully engage in. And the dehumanization of people, not not because not in a Holocaust sort of way to link it back to the stuff we've been doing in class, but not like that. Dehumanization in the sense that we don't see each other as human beings anymore. People who matter, people who have something to say, something of value, right? We are too preoccupied or occupied with ourselves to consider other people. This is the world of Fahrenheit 451. Now let's look at the world from where it comes, the 50s. And it's important because its immediate context spurs a lot of the themes in the novel, though the novel may resonate with our time today. So the Second World War had ended a few years before, and there was still an atmosphere of doom, especially because of nuclear power. So and this might be reminiscent of might be echoed in the novel at some point. I'm just letting you know. Now, more jobs lead to Americans having more discretionary income. So there's a kind of a conformity and passivity that comes with an America that is a little more affluent, right? There is the era of McCarthyism, which, if you remember from Death of a Salesman, though not related to the novel, Arthur Miller, the writer of Death of a Salesman and of The Crucible, in The Crucible, he creates this Salem 1792 society that really is supposed to be representative of McCarthyism and his witch hunt, or rather his communist witch hunt. So in this era, there was also a lot of mistrust, is the point. In this time period, there was a lot of fear, a scare, the Red Scare, and there was a lot of mistrusting of who people. And this is an element that happens in the novel. There is this feeling that I don't know who to trust, and I don't know who has my best interest in mind. Also, remember that this is the time where 1984 comes out as well, because 1984 is written and published in 1948. So there is definitely that idea that we don't know who to trust. Technology and electronics are booming in many ways, in ways that we hadn't seen before, spurred primarily because of the war, or the technological advances were spurred because of the conflict. But technology is growing at such a rapid rate in this time period that it's alarming. I mean, these are the people that envisioned flying cars. So you can imagine how quickly they thought technology was going to grow, right? And illiteracy, not in the sense that people can't read, but this is a time period where, and even today, where we're not reading as often as we used to. That is, reading sizable portions of text. Now, another thing that is from the world of the 50s is consumerism. The idea that because of this newly formed middle class, then somehow if we could buy, we mattered more, right? Also, the US is becoming rapidly an automobile culture. We have things, we can show things, we have discretionary income, right? We have jobs that are a little more stable. And this is creating prosperity, which in turn creates conformity in the society. But this idea of consumerism being crucial to one's success is prevalent in Fahrenheit 451. Technology as it grows, this is the TV, the life of the TV at the time. So from 10,000 in 1945 to 6 million in 1950, right? And you can only imagine today, though I think the idea here is not necessarily to look at the growth of the TV, but to look at the way technology that creates a kind of armchair travel, where you look at a screen and then you either taken somewhere or in your imagination, or you're immersed into the narrative or whatever it's happening. This kind of technology is is the one that we're looking at, because that's the one that has grown the most, especially now. We have so many access to so many screens. We're always constantly staring at a screen. And for as long as we can't go back to school because of the virus, we're going to be looking at a screen for even longer. So now, Ray Bradbury, he always said that he wasn't trying to predict the future, that he was trying to prevent it because he saw the world going in this direction. However, he did anticipate the things that would happen in the future. So this one you'll see as the novel gets on their way. This one, headphones, right? Things like that. So wall to wall screens, TV that is interactive in the sense of they have, well, in the novel, they have a play, and the people in the house can engage with the play that's happening on the screen, right? So there's an active quality to viewing, and sensational. This also feels very sensational. You get to watch something and see what's happening in these people's lives, right? Much like reality TV today, when we look at their lives, or so we think, right? That's the idea of reality TV. That's a big irony of reality TV. The rise in violence, and this is very subtle in the book Fahrenheit 451, but it's very prevalent. We just don't think about it, but because there's so many other things going on. But there is an incredible rise in violence in the book, which is supposed to be mirroring what's happening in the time as well. Condensation of information is important. It relates to the growing literacy. The idea is that we're reading things faster. I mean, look at this. Look at this very PowerPoint, right? We're not reading an entire text, going over all this information, right? We're looking at bullet points, at headlines, little moments is what we're doing. We are in a society that condenses information so quickly, so often, right? That it's difficult for us to sit through an entire piece of information, which is why we find it easier to eliminate books. It's interesting because Fahrenheit 451 comes from a man who only wrote short stories. Even his novels, for the most part, were a collection of short stories. The Illustrated Man, The Martian Chronicles, and this one too. Each chapter, there are three in total. Each chapter works, independent of the other, though they all work together, of course. So it's interesting that even he realized at the time that the rise of the short story was happening. They say that we live now in the world of the short story. Now, there was a loss of meaningful interaction with other people. I mean, if we are distracted with things that are calling for our attention, with screens, with things that we're watching, how can we be expected to engage truly with anybody else, right? Being surveilled by police or the government, though I think in our modern world, police and governmental surveillance aren't really the concern as much as being watched by institutions, by organizations, right? Like other people can see always what I'm doing, what we're doing. Perhaps they can look into if your parents, for instance, they track you with apps. I'm sure they do. Your internet history is probably recorded and reviewed maybe by parents or something like that. I think the point I'm trying to make is that there are organizations that don't necessarily have to be governmental or police organizations, but there are corporations. There's always somebody who knows what you're doing, and this is the kind of world we live in now, right? And he, in many ways, anticipated this. And an over reliance on technology for all kind of interaction. I mean, we have websites where we meet online. I mean, that's so common. We are meeting right now remotely. It's this is we've arrived. We arrived to where he said we would go. Now, these are some of the important themes present in Fahrenheit 451. There is a suppression of speech and material, which is considered objectionable, harmful, sensitive, which I talked about before. The people in this world say, this idea is too much for me to handle. Therefore, I want to censor it. Now, censorship begins with the people, not the governments. And because we lose the ability to think, then we cannot make good decisions, right? So this kind of censorship deprives us of self-expression, and though it is self-generated. So it leads us to a mindless, pleasure-seeking, and materialistic, empty life, right? But you can see the steps here. You can see the steps. So the overall idea is that technology is dangerous. Yes, it's good. I know a lot of you are thinking, but technology is good. It brings us together. It saves lives. Right, right. But I think the overall idea of Fahrenheit 451 and of science fiction altogether is that technology is dangerous. Meaning it won't always destroy, but it can and very much will if given the opportunity, right? Commercialization can erode or overpower spiritual values, and people lose their humanity if we're not able to communicate with each other. These are the effects. These are the things that happen because of this. Now, since the book is so much about book burning, I mean, there's firemen who burn books. It's funny because he changes the name from firefighters to firemen. So we cannot have this conversation without considering the very idea, it's not the first, but it's definitely one of the most famous, at least on this side of the world, book burning events that happened in 1933. And this is the, I wouldn't say the Germans, I would say the Nazis, right? Or the Nazi sympathizers within the German government. They launched an action against un-German spirit. And what they did is that they took books that they deemed um, anti-German, or well, books that just did not represent the spirit of it. But the thing is that when I say books that are anti-German, it sounds like a good thing, right? Like if there were books that were anti-American, which sounds like against American values, then you might be willing to say, well, I get it. But these are not books that were primarily un-German in spirit. These were books that because of the Nazi bigotry and the totalitarian regime that was ensuing in 1933, which is a very turbulent year for Germany. I think Hindenburg had just died, and Hitler had become the chancellor at the time. So because of their own bigotry and their own hatred, that's what leads to the book burning. I wouldn't say that this is. I don't want to characterize it as something positive, right? I don't know of any positive occurrence where book burning is a good thing, except maybe for this one. This is book burning today. These are in 2012. Reportedly, they burned 50 Shades of Grey. Now, this is it was organized by DJs in Cleveland. They were prompted by calls to the station complaining about the novel. So people brought their own copies of the work, and oh wow, a woman even contributed her Nook. Forgot about that. That's a shame because those are pretty nifty machines. The local fire department was called to ensure the safety of the book burners, and they destroyed about 20 to 25 copies. I hope, however, that they did not purchase the book in order to burn it, because that would be counterintuitive. But the very idea that book burning still happens today, and this is only one instance of many others. So, this is an introduction to Fahrenheit 451. As we conclude, here are the assignments. Now I'm going to end the video because we're going to talk about this when we meet online. Okay.